Hey there guys, I'm SonicGhost, and welcome back to Metroid Zero Mission. It's been a while since we finished our very first mission here in the Metroid franchise, and it's time for us to take a look at what we unlocked for beating Metroid Zero Mission. For starters, you may have noticed that my file has a new icon on it. As you can tell, anytime that you beat Metroid Zero Mission, your file will now change to have the Screw Attack logo on it at the very far right, indicating that that is now a completed save file. If we go back into our game here, besides getting that satisfying sound loading into our file at any given time, we can pause our game, and now we can see here on our map how many items we collected in the said area. And if you have all of a specific expansion, say you have all the missiles in an area, you will get a check mark on that said item, and you can see how many of those items are in the area in total. So there are 3 E-tanks here in Chazodia, and I'm missing one of them. You can also see down in the bottom left-hand corner, we have an overall timer running for how long we've been playing Metroid Zero Mission on this file. These stats show up once you beat Metroid Zero Mission. So now that we beat the game, we have ourselves some extra stats that we can see at any given time whenever we want in the pause menu. This is not the only way though we can see these said stats, as these transfer over into essentially a New Game Plus file. So back on the file select screen, if we select our file once again, we have 2 options when we start our game: continue or new. If we hit new, this will erase all of our save data, but our New Game Plus status will transfer over here into our brand new save, so we don't lose our completion on the set save data. Now we can see here we have our 2 difficulties we had when we first started the game, easy and normal. But there's a new option here in New Game Plus exclusively: hard mode. Once you beat Metroid Zero Mission for the first time, a new difficulty unlocks in the form of hard mode. This way of playing the game is not for the faint of heart. As hard mode, it lives up to its name. Hard mode in Metroid Zero Mission, you take more damage on average now to every single enemy. So everything will hit for 2 times extra damage. Not just that, but expansions have also been nerfed in New Game Plus. So instead of getting 5 missile packs, you will get only 2 missiles out of that said given pack. So it's a very, very hard way of playing Metroid Zero Mission. It's very easy to die here within the first minute too. Just taking a couple hits from a different set of enemies here, you're dead in an instant in this game. And it doesn't help that now energy tanks, instead of giving you 99 points more health, are only giving you half of that. So now you need 2 energy tanks to equate to just 1 normal energy tank pickup in the easy or normal difficulties. And you only get 1 super missile when you pick up a super missile upgrade. Same for only 1 power bomb when you collect the power bomb tanks as well. So the biggest problem I have with the hard mode playthrough of Metroid Zero Mission, not just all the damage you take, it's also the lack of resources. Hard mode also upgrades a lot of the enemies in Metroid Zero Mission, so not only are enemies doing more damage to you due to a damage buff in the set difficulty, but you also deal with more aggressive enemies overall in hard mode. Not to mention, in the stealth sequence in Chazodia, some save rooms are flat out removed to make the section even harder. Yeah, there's a save room on my left here, but they filled in the wall for hard mode. There is no way of getting to the save. It would be here normally, but I can't get it. I didn't know that, but they get rid of the save in this area. They make it harder on save rooms. No wonder why I'm struggling so much, because there's less save points. There's only the ones that are on the beaten path now. No optional ones. That sucks. While playing in hard mode, you may notice that some areas have a lot more enemies compared to any other difficulty. And this is very apparent once you get to an area like, say, Torian. There are more Metroids in Torian that you have to deal with, making things a lot worse on the player, and in some cases, a really big resource farm, as Metroids are only able to be killed with either 5 missiles or 1 super missile after you use the ice beam on them. And they do a lot of damage if they grab Samus in any form, so hard mode Torian is one of the worst parts of Metroid Zero Mission here, just because of all the damage the Metroids can do to you at any given time, not to mention just how many more you have to deal with in hard mode. The stealth section in the Zero Suit section is also a lot worse in hard mode, as there are more spotlights that you have to dodge, and there are also a lot more space pirates around the area, making it a lot harder to sneak around Chozodia, whether it be in the spaceship section or in the Chozo section here. It's just a lot harder to sneak around without being detected. So you probably spend a lot of the Zero Suit section in hard mode being chased by space pirates, which is not ideal, as in hard mode, you take 2 whole E-tanks worth of damage for any given time you're shot or hit a body of a space pirate. The final boss also gets a lot harder in hard mode here in Metroid Zero Mission, but doubly so if you 100% complete the game. Mecha Ridley is already known for dealing double damage once you get all the items in Metroid Zero Mission, but stack that with the extra damage you do in hard mode, and this guy's a menace. Yikes, dude. I might want to safety save after I get that final E-tank, because spoilers, I think I'm doing it again. This guy does, oh man, so much health. That's half my health in one swipe. Now I'm out of my supers. Dude, I knew this guy was terrible at 100% hard. I didn't know how bad it was. I only have 2 hits lenience. That is so strict. I need a crap ton of health if I was gonna have any chance to survive this. And that's not happening. Any timers you would also have to deal with for escape sequences in Metroid Zero Mission have been reduced in hard mode as well. So the self-destruct sequence getting out of Torian, instead of being 2 minutes like it is in normal mode, your timer has now been reduced to only 1 minute. And if you play this section pretty carelessly, it's gonna make it really hard to escape the planet before it explodes. So timer sections in hard mode definitely become a lot more stressful. The final timer here, escaping from Chozodia, is also lowered once you defeat Mecha Ridley. So, in the final chase sequence out of the game, you, instead of having 5 minutes to complete this escape sequence, you only have 3. So, yeah, with the lower time amounts, you really can't be affording to make any mistakes in the hard mode playthrough of Metroid Zero Mission. But if you make your way through the entirety of the game on hard mode, you can unlock different ending screenshots depending on how good or bad you played the game compared to normal or easy mode. But that's all the differences here for Metroid Zero Mission if you play the game in hard mode. I'll not be playing this game through its hard mode in its entirety here for this set series, but the footage that you just saw for the said hard mode playthrough was recorded via a live stream. So if you want to see a full hard mode playthrough of Metroid Zero Mission by yours truly, I will leave a link to that said stream VOD in the video description, and it will also be featured in the Metroid Zero Mission playlist. But for beating Metroid Zero Mission in hard mode, you do unlock a sound test option in the options menu. So if we go into the options screen, we can go ahead now and listen to any of the songs here in Metroid Zero Mission via the sound test. Hard mode isn't the only other difficulty option that you're able to play here in Metroid Zero Mission. We also have the game in easy mode that we can play through, which easy mode in Metroid Zero Mission is probably the way to go if this is your first time ever playing a game of Metroid in general because it plays out basically the same as normal mode, except now you don't take nearly as much damage. And with hard mode, it adds more enemies in certain areas, but on easy mode, certain things are tweaked in Metroid Zero Mission to make your overall experience a lot more comfortable and not as challenging. The adventure does become a little bit easier, not just in terms of damage output, but also in terms of the overall challenge. So easy mode is definitely the way to go if you want to have an easier time playing this said game, but this is not a mode that I'm going to be covering for the series because it essentially plays the same as normal mode, but obviously easier. So there's no real differences unlike hard mode. But there is a secret fourth option to play Metroid Zero Mission. Yeah, we don't just have 3 different difficulties here that we can play in this said game. There's a fourth way of playing, which is a little confusing because, simply put, this is an unlockable that is also hidden behind a cheat code. And most people don't even know this exists. So for starters, to play in this said mode in question, you need to have your game beaten at least once to have the ScrewAttack logo on your save icon like so. You don't want to hit the A button just yet because you'll just get the continue or new option. No, instead, while you're on the start game option here, you want to press up, left, right, and down. And if you did so correctly, you'll have a third menu option appear once you hit that final input. New Time Attack. So this is another New Game Plus option. So we'll still have all of our extras from New Game Plus, where you can keep track of your items and see how long you're playing anytime you pause the game, but with a little bit of an extra incentive. Time Attack is an alternate game mode which takes place in the normal mode difficulty. Playing through this game is no different now in Time Attack compared to playing in normal mode, but at the end of the game, that clear time you have will be recorded on your save file, and that said time will now be compared between 2 different categories, a 100% completion category and a non-100% completion territory. So you can race against yourself here and trying to get a personal best time within an 80% or 100% category of Metroid Zero Mission. The game will log your ID and password for that said playthrough, so you can easily share the score with friends or even just post them online and just in general brag about how fast you can beat Metroid Zero Mission. But when you beat Time Attack for the very first time, you do unlock a new option in your options menu so you can see all of your logged Time Attack records times. And these said times only get updated when you're playing the game in Time Attack. One other thing to note is that you actually cannot copy your Time Attack file to another slot, so that slot you cannot modify. But since we are on the subject of beating Metroid Zero Mission as fast as possible, there is a very specific thing about Metroid Zero Mission that I would like to talk about that might help you try to lower your time if you're attempting Time Attack mode here in the game. There are plenty of shortcuts in Metroid Zero Mission that you can take to make your game either harder or just a much faster experience in general. And because of that, there are certain things you can do in Metroid Zero Mission that will allow you to complete the game with very minimal items. So, it is possible to beat this game with only a handful of items, specifically taking developer-intended shortcuts in Metroid Zero Mission. All you need to beat this game is the Morph Ball, missiles, bombs, the 3 unknown items, Ice Beam, and then the Power Grip, strangely enough. There's nothing in the game that requires you to use the Power Grip until you get to the Zero Suit Samus section of the game. So, unfortunately, you would think it is maybe possible to skip the Power Grip, but there's actually a tangled vine fruit that just appears for some reason in Norfair when you don't have Power Grip, and it will despawn once you get the power. So Power Grip is required to even get to the Zero Suit Samus section of the game. Otherwise, that could be a power that could be entirely skipped. Oh my god, are you... I did not know about this. This is the most why. Like, why is this here? Are you really telling me I need power grip because there's no bugs in this room? What? I've never seen this before. Is there any way to get past this without power grip? Because I never thought that what is this? While we're on the subject of sequence breaking, I do want to mention certain little sequence breaks you could do here in Metroid Zero Mission to get some items early. One of the big things you can do in Metroid Zero Mission is something called bomb jumping, where you continuously boost off of your Morph Ball bomb to gain more height in the air, which allows you to get to some areas you're normally never able to reach. So here in Brimstar, we can use bomb jumping to get to the very top of the map in Brimstar to get to where the Various suit is located early. So utilizing bomb jumps yet again, we need to have high jump to reach a said high section here that obviously with bomb jumps we can just trivialize, but it is a little tricky on timing. Bomb jumping in Metroid Zero Mission takes some practice to get used to, but once you get the timing down, then it becomes pretty trivial. And honestly, bomb jumping in Metroid Zero Mission is the easiest in the entire franchise, in my opinion, because the timing in this is pretty lenient to a point where you can literally just button mash to gain height off of your bombs. But you can utilize bomb jumping to get to the Various suit early and get this item as soon as you get Morph Ball bombs in just the first few minutes of playing Metroid Zero Mission. It is a little tricky to grab this said item without high jump and also without power grip, but it is possible. By doing this sequence break to get Various suit early, not only do you have reduced damage early on in the game, but also the access to get into heated areas without worrying about taking damage. But by getting the Various suit early, we did actually skip a cutscene that we needed to watch back down in Lower Norfair with a Chozo statue. That now will no longer point us to the Brimstar location later in the game, telling us to head back and grab this said suit once we have the necessary upgrades. Essentially, we skip the cutscene by getting this suit out of order. Once you have yourself your Various suit, there's another thing you can do to get an item pretty early, but this was developer intended. So, utilizing the Morph Ball bombs, we can actually skip the use of Speed Booster here in Norfair, which will get us to where the screw attack is located. Normally you need to beat Ridley, and from here you can get into the top section of the said platform with a secret cannon, but there is a hidden set of missile blocks on the far left that you can just shoot, and by shooting those missile blocks, you can gain access to where the screw attack is. So all you really need is the Various suit, or a lot of E-tanks specifically as well, to get to where the screw attack is early. But let's go back to talking about how you can skip items here in Metroid Zero Mission. You do not need super missiles to beat Metroid Zero Mission, as really the only time you need super missiles in this game is to get into Ridley. So because of this, there is actually a hidden missile block in the right room once you enter Ridley that you can go ahead and use to skip having to get supers from any place in the game. And then from here, you gain access to the entire area without having to use super missiles for anything else. And then afterwards, there is one more thing you need to do to get inside of Ridley, and just hit some bomb blocks, and from here, you can complete the whole area without super missiles. Another item you can skip is the screw attack. You don't need the screw attack to actually beat the game, because there are screw attack blocks that you normally would need the set power for, but there are hidden blocks throughout the game that you can access, which will allow you to bypass screw attack. For example, in the very lower part here in Norfair, right after you get out of the Ridley section, there is a hidden missile block which will take you to a secret cannon here, and that cannon will shoot you straight up to the second speed booster cannon, which will send you out of Norfair. Then from here, we can just utilize the two missile blocks that are right next to the cannon in the middle section of Norfair to shoot our way all the way up to the top section here and make our way out of the area. Now, speaking of speed booster, another power you can skip in this game is none other than the speed booster itself. Even though there was plenty of sections in Metroid Zero Mission that introduced the speed booster, the original Metroid's design was considered without the said power in mind, as this was not added until the third entry in Metroid with Super Metroid. So there are plenty of opportunities to bypass a lot of speed booster blocks in Metroid Zero Mission, either by having some clever jump timing or using bomb jumping. Various Suit is also another thing that can be skipped in Metroid Zero Mission, as if you take the Ridley early shortcut in Norfair, you can avoid every single heated room throughout your adventure in Metroid Zero Mission if you're just completing the main story. And if you do end up beating Metroid Zero Mission without the Various Suit up until the point where you lose your said suit at the end of the escape sequence in Torian, that cutscene is actually slightly different, as Samus is not wearing the Various Suit there, but just her basic power suit. So there is a slight difference in a cutscene if you decide to skip Various Suit. But once you actually complete the Zero Suit section of the game and pass the Ruins test to get your fully powered suit, the game will automatically give you the Various Suit alongside of your gravity suit you collected as an unknown item. This is because one of the rooms in Chazodia requires the Various Suit due to it being in lava. So, realistically speaking, you can beat Metroid Zero Mission as low as a 9% item completion by just getting Morph Ball, missiles, bombs, the 3 unknown items, Power Grip, Ice Beam, and Various Suit. You can skip basically everything else in the game thanks to a lot of developer-intended shortcuts that are inside of Metroid Zero Mission. If you want to use these shortcuts for your time attack run, you can get some pretty low times. Otherwise, play the game normally and see just how fast you can beat Metroid Zero Mission. In terms of unused content in Metroid Zero Mission, there is one big piece of unused content that is worth talking about, and that is an entirely scrapped boss battle in the game. So right now I'm playing a modified version of Metroid Zero Mission that adds back in this said content. At one point, Crocomire was originally going to be a boss battle in Metroid Zero Mission, but it was cut from the game for unknown reasons. The data for Crocomire is still in the Game Boy Advance code itself, so we are playing a ROM hack of Metroid Zero Mission that adds back in the Crocomire data called Crocomire Demo, which was made by TrueNar68. And here he is, the unused man himself, Crocomire. Now, because Crocomire is an unfinished boss battle here in Metroid Zero Mission, it doesn't function perfectly, but it is possible to fight this said enemy. So, Crocomire originally debuted in the Metroid franchise, starting with the third game in the series, Super Metroid. In order to fight Crocomire, you need to wait until he opens his mouth, and then you can shoot inside that said mouth with either a charge shot or your missiles. Crocomire also shoot out these little balls for you to get back your health and your missiles, but you just keep on shooting Crocomire's health here with missiles or charge shots, and just keep on shooting him in the mouth until eventually he dies. This is not how the boss fight worked in Super Metroid, so presumably the boss fight here in Metroid Zero Mission would have played entirely different compared to how he functions in later Metroid games. But now we've taken a look at all of the different ways you can play Metroid Zero Mission between the difficulties and even the time attack mode, I think we should take a look at all of the different endings that we unlock here in Metroid Zero Mission. And man, there are a lot of images in the gallery. I've only gotten a handful of images here on this save file, but there are up to 8 different endings you can get in Metroid Zero Mission. So, let's take a look at all the different endings here that you can unlock in this said game. The first one here is ending number 1. This you unlock for completing the game on easy for over 4 hours without finding 100% of the items. And as you can see, Samus here appears sitting on top of a rocky terrain in her said gravity suit. So this is the very first ending of the game you unlock if you're playing on easy. The second ending here you get for completing the game on normal or hard difficulty over 2 hours without 100% of items. In this ending, as you can see, Samus appears looking out on the horizon with her helmet removed. So she's still wearing the power suit, but you lose the helmet, so you get to see a tiny bit more of her if you complete the game on normal or hard over 2 hours without 100%. Ending number 3 is completing the game on normal or hard mode under 2 hours without 100% of the items. In this ending, Samus's entire power suit is now removed, revealing her Zero Suit, which is the same one we saw while playing as Zero Suit Samus here in the game. So this ending is very similar to ending number 2, except now you've beaten the game under 2 hours. Ending number 4, this you unlock for completing the game on normal or hard difficulty over 2 hours with 100% completion. And this ending has Samus sport a 2-piece orange outfit while strolling through a city street. So, a little bit more work to get to this said ending, but unfortunately, even though you're 100% of the game, you're still over that said 2-hour mark. And if you get this screenshot, you really know right away, my time was just probably a little over 2 hours, wasn't it? Because I've gotten ending number 4 plenty of times while trying to 100% this game. Just barely over that 2-hour mark. But we get to ending number 5, which is the ending we got for the main series here, completing the game on normal difficulty under 2 hours with 100% of items. And this has Samus sport her 2-piece orange outfit, once again, now sitting at a bar in an unknown location. So if you're playing on normal mode and you see this screenshot, you know you got the best ending for that said difficulty. Moving on, now we have ending number 6 here, which you unlock for completing the game on hard mode under 2 hours with 100% of all the items. Samus now will sit on top of a cliff overlooking an unknown city at night, once again wearing that orange 2-piece outfit. So this here is a very difficult ending to get because you're not only playing on the hard mode, which is already much harder than any other difficulty in the game due to all of its said limitations, but you also have to beat the game 100%, 2 hours. This ending here specifically, I've never really seen on my own time playing because it takes a lot of skill to beat this game under 2 hours with all the items, especially on hard mode. So if you get this ending, then you definitely got one of the best endings here in Metroid Zero Mission. Moving on to the penultimate ending here, ending number 7. This you get for completing the game on normal mode with an item collection rate of 15% or less. This ending has Samus rest atop a windowsill in her 2-piece orange outfit. This is also one of the hardest endings to get because completing the game with 15% or less of any of the items takes a lot of skill. You don't have many missiles to use in your entire adventure, and as mentioned earlier during the time attack section, you only need a very small handful of items in the game to beat Metroid Zero Mission. You have a little bit of wiggle room because the lowest you can go is 9%, but 15% normal difficulty is still a really difficult ending, and this is something I've never seen personally. So if you get this ending, you have a lot of skill in this game. But there's one more ending that tops ending number 7 here, and that's our final one. Game ending number 8. You unlock this one for completing Metroid Zero Mission on hard mode with an item collection rate of 15% or less. In this ending, Samus stands in battle with her gravity suit while a large portrait of herself appears in the background. If you unlock this image, you have done one of the hardest things in this entire franchise. Beating the game with 15% or less of items is already challenging enough on normal mode. But with the higher damage ceiling that you take in hard mode, while combining the very small amount of pickups you get in hard mode to begin with, this ending is extremely rough. I've only met one other person who's ever been able to do this specific run of Metroid Zero Mission and unlock hard mode 15% ending screenshots. This is not an ending you're going to be getting without a lot of pain and suffering. But if you're going to lock it, you get the best ending in Metroid Zero Mission. But you may have noticed, though, there's another option here in the options menu right underneath Gallery. Metroid Fusion Link. This here is a little weird, actually, that this even exists in Zero Mission. But it does actually give you something if you have a copy of Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance, a second Game Boy Advance, and a Game Boy Advance link cable. So to link up your two different Metroid Game Boy Advance games together, you must have your Game Boy Advance with Metroid Zero Mission as the primary system, and then Metroid Fusion as the secondary system in your Game Boy Advance hookup. When you're booting up Metroid Fusion on your second Game Boy Advance, hold down the Start and Select buttons as you turn on your Game Boy Advance to get rid of that Nintendo logo. Then, on your Metroid Zero Mission copy, you want to start the Metroid Fusion link. From here, your two different games will talk to each other, and if you did everything correctly, you will now have your link completed between Metroid Fusion and Metroid Zero Mission. So, once you get rid of the data link complete screen on Zero Mission, now the Fusion gallery will be unlocked. So for linking up your copy of Metroid Zero Mission to Metroid Fusion, you will now be able to look at all of the ending screenshots from Metroid Fusion in your copy of Metroid Zero Mission. And I mean all of the endings in Metroid Fusion. The North American and European versions of Metroid Fusion only contain 5 different endings. The Japanese version of Metroid Fusion, on the other hand, contain a total of 11 endings. It doesn't matter if you're linking up between a North American, European, or even a Japanese copy of Metroid Fusion into your copy of Metroid Zero Mission, you will get all 11 endings that are shown in the Japanese version in your Metroid Fusion gallery here in Zero Mission. You will also get 2 bonus special artwork images exclusive for linking the 2 different Metroid games together inside of Metroid Zero Mission. These 2 pieces of special artwork cannot be viewed in Metroid Fusion whatsoever, making this link up between the 2 different Game Boy Advance Metroid games a very unique and very interesting way to just share data between your 2 different copies of Metroid. Keep in mind, you don't need to have had any of your save files completed in Metroid Fusion. You don't need to beat the game in Fusion whatsoever to see all 13 ending screenshots inside of Metroid Zero Mission. You just need to link the 2 different Game Boy Advance games together to see all of these endings in the Metroid Fusion gallery of Metroid Zero Mission. And now we have our final option here in the options menu to look at, something we unlocked when we beat Metroid Zero Mission for the first time. And that is the original Metroid. The entirety of the original NES Metroid game is unlockable here in Metroid Zero Mission. I will say though, this is not the best way of playing the original Metroid game by any means necessary. And that's because of the Game Boy Advance's resolution. When you play the original Metroid on an actual Nintendo Entertainment System, and then you go play the Game Boy Advance version, you definitely start seeing some seams here. And I mean that quite literally. Man, Samus looks a little chunky in this one. Comparing the Game Boy Advance output of the original NES Metroid to the actual original NES Metroid, yeah, you can see a pretty big difference of resolution. This is because the original NES system was outputting in a 4:3 resolution, while the Game Boy Advance is outputting in a 3:2 resolution. This is a pretty big difference between the two because Game Boy Advance is as close to what we have to widescreen technology nowadays, and things just look a little more chunky and also a little more squished in. You start noticing it more when you're moving, so not the biggest fan of playing Metroid like this, but it is a very cool unlockable for back in 2004 because you got 2 games in one essentially back then, and that is really interesting. So for beating the entirety of a remake of one game, you get to go back and play the original game the said remake is based off of and see exactly how the original plays, which is a really good comparison between the 2 different Metroids. But I will say, the original Metroid has aged like a fine milk. This version of the game is not beginner friendly in the slightest, and it has a lot of issues. So having this inside of Metroid Zero Mission as unlockable really shine those issues through even more. So it's not a version I can recommend playing nowadays because this game is very difficult. There's no map, there's no real sense of direction. In fact, a lot of rooms in the original Metroid have a very bad copy and paste mentality. So if you're actually going out of your way to play the original Metroid, then you're gonna have a lot of issues trying to even figure out where you're going, because the game is pretty hard to play without a guide of some kind. So if you're going to play the original Metroid, I highly recommend having a guide of some kind on hand. But if you die here in the original game, you get a game over, as you would imagine, just like with the original, and you get a password here so you can continue where you left off. But in Metroid Zero Mission, if you're playing the original Metroid, we can save this process to the actual cartridge itself. So if I hit yes, now the game has saved. I'll hit no so I can leave, and that actually boots us back to the Metroid Zero Mission title screen. Now if I go back into options and play original Metroid, I can go to continue, and as you can see here, my password is just automatically put into the original Metroid. So I can just hit the start button and jump back into the game with all of my upgrades that I had after I saved the game, which means I have the morph ball. I don't have to go over to the left and go grab it. That's not the only way you can quit this game at any given time. You just press the L and the R buttons here, and you'll pull up a menu that allows you to continue or quit from here. You can reset the game at any given time to go back to the title screen. You can even put the game to sleep so you can save a little bit of your power on your batteries on your Game Boy Advance. But this is going to conclude our coverage of the original Metroid here inside of Metroid Zero Mission. Honestly, if I'm going to be playing the original Metroid, I would prefer to play the original NES release, which is available on a lot of different systems, from the Nintendo Wii all the way up to the Nintendo Switch. This was a good version of the original Metroid to play back in 2004 when Metroid Zero Mission first released, but nowadays with the multiple re-releases of the original NES Metroid, I wouldn't go back and play this version of OG Metroid. Just play Zero Mission instead. That is everything to cover in Metroid Zero Mission. All the unlockable modes, all the extra content that we get for beating the game, and even all the New Game Plus territory with both the original game and the remake on the Game Boy Advance. I hope you guys enjoyed this series thoroughly. Once again, if you want to see a full playthrough of this game in hard mode and also in time attack mode, I will be linking those stream VODs in the video description, and those stream VODs are also available to watch in the Metroid Zero Mission playlist here on my YouTube channel. So check out those VODs if you want to see full playthroughs of these alternate game modes. But other than that, that is all the content to cover here with the Game Boy Advance remake of Samus's very first outing. So with that said, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.